So this is the AHP speech and language therapy workshop. So hopefully they're all in the right place. Just bear with me and I will open the presentation. I'm having lots of technical issues today. There we go, some more people arriving. So in this session this afternoon, I've got a little presentation to sort of run through with you. So I've got a little presentation to run through with you, and then there's opportunities for questions. So if you want to ask me questions as we go along, that's absolutely fine. Or if you want to wait until the end, again, that's absolutely fine. So I'm Danielle Haddon. I'm the clinical lead speech and language therapist with East Midlands Forensic CAMHS and CAMHS Head to Head. I'm the highly specialist SLT with that team. We are a small team of speech and language therapists within CAMHS. And some of you might have come across speech and language therapists before. Is anybody brave enough to speak and sort of say whether they've come across speech and language before? What they're hoping to gain from this session? No, that's absolutely fine. So what I'll do then is I'll start the presentation, and then if you have any questions, just if you unmute yourselves and then just ask me the question, because I won't be able to see if your hands are up or anything. So I'll just share my screen. So you should be able to see that now. I think there's other people joining still. So hi everyone, welcome to our virtual CAMHS fair. During this session, there's a short presentation around the role of speech and language therapy within CAMHS, my career path, and then obviously an opportunity to ask questions. So like I said, I'm the clinical lead speech and language therapist with East Midlands Forensic CAMHS, and I work across two teams. So CAMHS Head to Head, which is specialist CAMHS service, and Forensic CAMHS, which is a regional team. So today we'll go through the role of SLT within CAMHS, some stats and why SLT is needed in CAMHS, my career pathway and an opportunity for questions, and to look at the live SLT vacancies. Although I haven't got access to the vacancies, they are in the chat. So if you want to have a look at them, then please feel free. There is a CAMHS lead speech and language therapist being advertised for CAMHS South team, so that's really exciting. So if there are any qualified speech and language therapists in the room that are looking for a career change or new opportunities, then please feel free to have a look at that. So as I said, we are a small team. There's myself as the clinical lead speech and language therapist with FCAMHS, and also the specialist SLT in Head to Head. Then we have a highly specialist SLT in the inpatient service, Clayfield House, and then we have two speech and language therapy assistants across FCAMHS and ID CAMHS. And there's lots of new opportunities coming. So there's the ones that are out today, but there's other opportunities coming up as well. So keep an eye out for those. Speech and language therapists generally have to have a degree or a master's with speech and language therapy, so it is a specialist degree. So if there are people that are sort of considering that, I'm happy to have a chat with you at the end around the sort of routes that you need to go through to sort of take up this as a career and profession. So the SLT role is to work with the multidisciplinary team to assess and diagnose children and young people with diagnosed and undiagnosed language and communication needs and eating and drinking difficulties, which we refer to as dysphagia. And this is to ensure that the language needs are identified and supported appropriately amidst very complex presentations with our young people. So we might be working with children and young people with diagnosed or undiagnosed autism spectrum disorders, developmental language disorder, ADHD, mental health, psychosis, all sorts of things. So it's helping to unpick what's happening for that young person and identifying if there are any language and communication needs that might then be added to the complexity of their presentation. And this means that the young person can then access any ongoing therapeutic support, which might consist of direct work with a specialist mental health nurse, cognitive behaviour therapist, it might be direct work with a speech and language therapist, it might be a combination of all of those things. So the sort of general role for the speech and language therapist would be to carry out specialist assessment, um, support formulation, advice, and intervention with that young person, provide training to CAMHS and the professional network around the young person, work collaboratively with the families, the child and young person, CAMHS teams, external agencies, including Education and Youth Justice Service. We provide peer supervision, clinical supervision, clinical audits. We work alongside sort of various professions so that we can raise awareness around language and communication sort of on the job, so in sort of joint sessions, ward rounds, those kinds of things, and also review documentation and accessibility to ensure that any young people that have additional needs or learning disabilities or anything are able to access sort of literature around their conditions and appropriate support. So why speech and language therapy needed in CAMHS? So research has shown that 81% of children with formally identified emotional and behavioural disorders have significantly below average language abilities. 45% of young people referred to mental health services had a higher order language impairment. This is difficulties with understanding inference, abstract language, such as metaphors, compared to 15% of young people in a comparison group. And children with a mental health disorder report having speech or language problems 5 times more than those without. So there's a real need for speech and language therapy within CAMHS, and we're a crucial part of the multidisciplinary team across all services. So SLTs work jointly with other professionals to make important contributions to the quality of care provided to young people in community and inpatient settings. And we sort of support young people to understand and be involved in decisions about their care and create a supportive communication environment which can help to reduce physical interventions if and restrictive practices within inpatients. SLTs also support successful and timely transitions out of inpatient settings into the community and across a range of community settings, really, just to sort of contribute to risk assessments and formulations, create communication passports, positive behaviour support plans, advice and training to professionals and settings that will support the young person. Sorry. So many children and young people who are increased risk of developing mental health problems are also likely to have communication needs, including those with autism, learning disabilities and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so ADHD, children in care and young people involved in the justice system. And when I was carrying out the Youth Justice project over the last couple of years, we found that over 82% of children and young people within the Youth Justice Service, excuse me, sorry, had undiagnosed language and communication difficulties. So it just shows that actually by the time young people sort of on the edge of care or in pupil referral units, so young people that are generally struggling that end up in the youth justice service or might come into CAMHS, by the time they get to those services, there's lots of complexity around that young person and their language and communication difficulties are often masked, so they're not always picked up. Young people with developmental language disorder are very good at camouflaging. Children and young people with autism spectrum disorder are also very good at camouflaging, which means that they're able to sort of follow what other people are doing and learn to sort of behave in certain ways in certain environments. So again, their difficulties are not always recognised in different settings, and it's only when they get to sort of breaking point and things get too much for them that we then might start to see sort of really complex presentations. So you might then start to see some self-harming, or if they're in the youth justice pathway, you might start to see violence and aggression. And these are the young people that sort of get labelled as being like the naughty children or typical for that family, those kind of things. So it's just really important that language and communication needs are identified. Adolescents with developmental language disorder are more likely to have symptoms of depression and anxiety than their peers. And again, in the Youth Justice Project, there was a research paper that came out last year by Maxine Winstanley, who found that children with developmental language disorder that were open to the justice service were more than twice as likely to reoffend than their peers. So because of the two teams that I work with have quite close links to the youth justice service, so it's really important that we sort of identify those young people and put the appropriate support in place for them, so that if they are accessing interventions and work with different services, that they're aware of how to work with and support that young person. Um, Problems with pragmatic language disorder or social communication disorder, you might be more familiar with, in childhood are associated with psychotic experiences in adolescence. And again, that's a role that speech and language therapists play in terms of early psychosis, and supporting, working alongside the specialist nurses, as it might be that the young person isn't having a psychotic episode, it might be they're having their own thoughts and there's lots of stress and trauma going on and they're not quite sure how to sort of pull apart the two. So working as a team, you're able to unpick that a little bit more for the young person. So communication difficulties can also be a barrier to accessing psychological therapies. Um, so a lot of the psychological therapies rely heavily on the individual's ability to use language. So it might be that they've got to understand, have a good understanding of metaphors. If you've got a social communication difficulty or autism spectrum disorder, that might be something that's quite difficult for you. If you have an expressive language disorder, you might have difficulties sequencing your ideas and expressing your ideas. It might be that you are having difficulties putting your thoughts into articulating your thoughts and your emotions. If the young person's feeling lots of different emotions, it might be that they don't have the emotional vocabulary to express what they're thinking and feeling. And unable to regulate their own behaviour and interaction. So again, it just helps sort of build a picture for that young person, and share that with the network around how we can best support that young person, because it might be that some of the sort of traditional approaches used by CAMHS might not be suitable for the young person, due to their additional communication needs. So my career pathway then. So I started working with NOTS HC in January 2019 as the lead speech and language therapist with the Youth Justice Service. And that was part of a pilot with NHS England. And this was an amazing experience. I worked with some great teams within CAMHS and external agencies, and obviously the young people and their families. The project did sit within head to head. So once the project ended, I then carried on working with the head to head team. And because of they sort of cover a couple of pathways, I'll talk about those teams in a moment. I was able to continue working with those children from the Youth Justice Service as well. So the two teams that I sit within CAMHS are the East Midlands Forensic CAMHS team, and that's a regional team. So we cover the whole of the East Midlands, and the team's based, made up of forensic psychologists, consultant child and adolescent psychiatrists, consultant social worker, specialist mental health nurses, speech and language therapy assistant, psychology assistant, and we have students as well, so for speech and language nursing and psychology. So that's always an opportunity to sort of get a feel for the team and things as well. So for the East Midlands Forensic CAMHS service, it's a consultation service to the professional networks around young people that are deemed to be at risk, significant risk to themselves or others. So it might be that they've got significant mental health needs, or it might be that they've opened to youth justice service, or sort of on that edge of sort of teetering into criminality. It might be that it's a combination of the two that's adding to their complexity. So we would sort of support the professional network around that young person, just to have a think about them and formulate risk assessments, and planning. Where there are gaps in resources where that young person is living, it might be they've not got access to speech and language or psychology or certain assessments. So then we would then carry out a assessment for that young person if it helps with the formulation around that young person and support moving onwards if they're moving on to a new placement and things. So that's when we would carry out some direct work. For CAMHS Head to Head, they are a local based service within Nottinghamshire, and they have 4 pathways. So the pathways are early psychosis, substance misuse, harmful sexual behaviour, and youth justice. So speech and language therapy sits across all 4 pathways. So if any of the young people that come into any of those pathways has any additional language and communication needs, or there's felt that there's some complexities that we aren't sure whether that is down to language and communication that's been sort of unrecognised or undiagnosed, then a speech and language assessment will be carried out. And as part of that, it might be that it's contributing towards the ASD assessment for that young person. It might be that you're carrying out an ADOS yourself for that young person. But it is a sort of mixture and a team effort. So they're both really great teams to work with, lots of support. There's clinical supervision and managerial supervision on a monthly basis. There's clinical supervision and access to the professional network for speech and language therapists. There's lots of peer support. So it's a really supportive environment. So my career, I qualified in 2004 as a speech and language therapist. So the route is either a degree or a master's. And then I worked in a neighbouring trust for 15 years with children and young people, again, across a range of areas. So preschool, early years, mainstream settings, pupil referral units, the CAMHS County Neurodevelopmental Pathway, before coming over to Notts Healthcare. Within Notts Healthcare, I access the BME support network within Notts, which is a great network. And I'm also part of the first cohort of parallel learning partnerships, working with the executives and senior leadership teams to sort of develop leadership skills and learn from each other, which is only just starting, but it's been really interesting and lots of fun. And I'm also leading on the action plan for race, religion and beliefs within CAMHS to help catch the voices of our young people and remove barriers. What we've found in some sort of data that's come through within CAMHS, FCAMHS and youth justice is that there is sort of disproportionality between the BME community within CAMHS and youth justice. So there are more people accessing sort of open to youth justice service from BME backgrounds than their white peers, and in mental health it's the opposite way around. So it's just looking to see what's sort of contributing towards that and help raise awareness around sort of mental health needs in young people and catching them before they get to crisis. So I've got a little bit of an activity. So I don't know if anybody's feeling brave enough to sort of speak out for this. It's just to give you an idea of how sort of anxiety-provoking activities can be if we've got to speak out. It's not anything to do with speech and language specifically. It's not anything to do with the presentation. It is just sort of like a general knowledge kind of quiz. Don't have to do this. So I will come off. I will stop sharing my screen so that I can ask you the questions and I can sort of read the room a little bit more. She says, when I find how to stop sharing my screen. There we go. So is anybody feeling like they would like to take part in this, or would you like to just ask some questions around speech and language therapy, what it entails, the vacancies that are currently on offer? Is anybody brave enough? I don't bite. Do you want to put questions in the conversation strip if you don't want to ask any questions?
Hi, I'll ask you a question. My name's Sandra. I work at Nottingham Trent University within our employability team.
Hi, Sandra.
Hello. So part of my role is to support students that are looking for placements.
Okay.
So I work within the School of Social Sciences and the Business School, but mainly my role is to support the psychology students. So just wanted to know if you do have any placement opportunities for that particular cohort.
So within forensic CAMHS and head-to-head.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure we can arrange some. So if you want to pop your email into the chat, then I can email you. There aren't any that I know of at the moment. We have got a forensic psychology student with us at the moment who is due to leave, I think, at the end of July. So I'm sure there'll be space for some others. So yeah, if you want to
Okay.
pop your email in the chat, then or I can put my email in the chat and you can send me an email, whichever's easier for you.
Yeah, if you pop yours in the chat, that'll be easy for me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll do
Thank you
that now.
kindly.
There you go. So yeah, so if you've got if you want to send me over any information, and then I'll share that with our teams.
Lovely. Thanks, Danielle.
That's no problem at all. I'll share it with the wider CAMHS services as well, with our psychology team, and see if there's anything within their team as well.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? So East Midlands Forensic CAMHS is based in Nottingham. So this is from Faye. So they're both based in Nottinghamshire, at Hopewood at Pebble Bridge. But the East Midlands Forensic CAMHS team is a regional team, so we do cover the whole of the Midlands. So if there is any sort of young people that we need to go and carry out assessments for, then we would have to travel to them. So we go down as far as Milton Keynes. So it might be that you sat in the car on the motorway off down to Milton Keynes. And then sort of do your session as you would do wherever you were, really. So Milton Keynes are really all these sort of areas are really accommodating. So the CAMHS services will set up a room for us, or we'll do a home visit with a young person. So it's sort of like an assertive outreach approach. And head-to-head are the same. So but they're based in Nottingham City, and they cover the whole of the county. Eleanor, what does your daily job entail? Ooh, good question. So typical day in the speech and language therapist world. I think because of the sort of varying posts, it depends. So if I'm on a forensic CAMHS day, it will be mostly consultations, which will be via MS Teams at the moment until sort of all the COVID restrictions have been lifted. And that would, in those teams, it's around sort of thinking about what are the language and communication needs that are presenting for this young person. So the teams never come to you with this young person's got language and communication difficulties. They'll come to you and say, we've got a young person who's not engaging, or a young person who's rude to teachers, falling out with peers, not able to maintain friendships, at risk of criminal exploitation, might be involved in gangs. So that would be the sort of general sort of referral information that would come through to our team. And then because of the sort of experience that I've had from previous posts, I would sit there and think, actually, research has shown, and my experience has shown, that a lot of these young people have underlying language and communication difficulties. So sort of dig around asking questions, which then leads to either a speech and language assessment locally or with myself. And sort of advice and recommendations around how to support that young person. And some of those young people have to have ASD assessments, and then end up with an ASD diagnosis, and then support around that and what that means. With a typical day with head-to-head, is a little bit more intervention based. So I've been working recently with a young person that had presented with early psychosis, but then lost quite a lot of skills. So they're thinking there's something else going on there. So with him, because he's lost quite a lot of his language skills, I've been sort of looking at sort of communication books with him and how he can then communicate his wants and needs to his family, because he sort of gets emotionally dysregulated quite quickly, and then there's lots of aggression and anger towards parents, which they obviously struggle to manage. And then other days it will be sort of training, supporting junior colleagues, just raising general awareness around language and communication within CAMHS, writing reports, analysing assessments, and writing formulations. Does that answer your question, Eleanor?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's easier to talk if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Actually, I've got some more questions. So, is it quite focused on more kind of doing the assessments and writing the reports, or do you do quite a lot of the interventions, or is that someone else who does more of like the one-to-one work with a young person?
It's a real mix. So I think it depends really. I think because within CAMHS, you sort of tend to sit within separate teams. So you're the sort of main speech and language therapist within your team. So however you want that role to look, you sort of make it your own. So if I have got a young person that actually does need intervention with speech and language therapy, then I will very much carry out that intervention. And then eventually, when we've got to a point where another member of staff or sort of colleague within CAMHS is working with that young person, it might be that they then sort of carry on some of those interventions. So if it's around emotional regulation, it might be a joint working with the mental health nurse that's also supporting the family. Or it might be that you're sort of working alongside the family to sort of upskill them. It might be that you've got to go into school or education wherever they are and work with those. And with them involved in the Youth Justice Service, then there's a lot of work with the intervention team and they'll carry out some of your interventions. But it's very much guided by the therapist and how they want to work.
That's great, thank you.
So can I just ask, are you a speech and language therapist?
No, I'm not. I'm a psychology student at the minute doing my master's, but I also work as a teaching assistant in a high school. So I've got kind of the thoughts of going into, do I want to go into speech and language? Do I want to go into this, that, or the other? I'm not 100% sure just yet.
Yeah, speech and language all day long. I mean, obviously I work alongside the psychologists as well, and both professions are equally as interesting. I just think no 2 days are ever the same, and it doesn't matter how many young people you see, they just never present in the same way. So there's lots of skills that you can use with that young person, but because everybody's an individual, their presentation is always slightly different. So I just think you're constantly learning. I'm 17 years in and I still feel like I'm learning new skills all the time.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I see it as well from the school point of view. And it's quite interesting to only see one side of it, and then through kind of doing my psychology degree, I'm learning the other side of it, and how many different entities are involved in this, like one young person or this one family.
Yeah, there's so many factors, isn't there, that sort of impact on a young person and on their ability to sort of access learning. So if the young person's experienced lots of trauma, or they've got language and communication difficulties, there's so many factors that impact on that young person, and then they've got to try and contain themselves in a mainstream environment that's not really geared up for young people that have got additional needs. And it's not anything to do with their cognitive skills. So cognitive, they're quite able, but it is just that sort of load that's been put on them that they can't always manage, which is why we get a lot of young people ended up in sort of pupil referral units and alternative provision.
What are the ages at the minute in CAMHS?
Oh, I don't know. I think a lot of the young children, the young people that we get, they're generally sort of 13 upwards. So it's only been, I think we get occasional ones through for our specialist services that are probably 8 or 9, but most of them are a lot older. I think because we link in quite a lot with the Youth Justice Service, the age of criminality is 10, so they would always sort of be above 10. But within the sort of general CAMHS services, I'm not quite sure, so I wouldn't be able to tell you what the community CAMHS team sort of age groups are at the moment. I mean, the young people that have come to us for consultations have been a lot older, so sort of adolescents, sort of 14, 15 plus.
Yeah, that's what I'd imagine. From especially working at the high school, that's usually the time that they get referred to.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time they can sort of they have a lot of support in primary school. So a lot of these young people would have sort of got through primary school with, you know, reasonably good social communication skills. They'll be able to sort of camouflage a little bit, and they'll have support of their teaching assistants in class. Topics and subjects are generally differentiated to sort of accommodate their needs. But then when they move up to secondary school and they make that transition, I think towards the end of sort of, I don't know, October, November time, in year 7, that's when you sort of start to see the wheels falling off. And then you get lots of fallouts because those social skills are sort of really growing. So you'll have some peers that are really taken off, and then these ones that have actually got underlying difficulties that nobody sort of picked up on. They start to get anxiety or falling out with their friends, starting to think people are against them, and just don't really get the subtleties of sort of social communication and language. They need things to be a little bit more sort of concrete, rather than abstract for them. And then you get to sort of year 8 and 9, and that's when you can really start to see the difficulties come in then, and that's when you get a lot of the behaviour, young people sort of leaving lessons, not attending, the reports of them not engaging or being disruptive. So it's those young people that we're sort of trying to support to sort of stay into school without having to go into alternative provisions or even enter CAMHS in the first place.
Yeah, no, that definitely tracks, from what I've seen anyway. Yeah, thank you. This is really interesting.
Oh, well, thank you. Has anybody else got any questions? I could chat all day about speech and language and children. But if no one's got any questions, you know, I'm aware that there's lots of other sessions going on. I don't want you to miss out. Molly?
Yes, hi. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning, so I'm really sorry if you've already talked about this before. But I was just wondering what other careers are there within your team within allied health professions?
So within the AHPs, I haven't got the job list, but it is in the chat. There are 14 allied health professionals. We are the third biggest sort of combined profession within the NHS. So alongside nurses and doctors, AHPs are sort of third. So there are OTs, physios, dietitians. Now you're going to test me. I don't know everybody. Radiography, sorry. Can't think of anything else. Art therapists. Can't think of any more. But I'm not sure. Let me see if I can find the. If I can, I don't know if I'll be able to open the group chat. I think it'll make me leave the breakout room. But I think if you've got access to the virtual fair chat, all of the jobs that are live are in there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
That's no problem. And then if you go to the market stalls later,
Yeah.
there's the TNA apprenticeships and career progression market stall, and then there's the learning development team. So they might have more information around sort of different professions and what jobs are coming live.
Okay, yeah, that would be really useful because I'm thinking about changing career. So I am already working at the moment.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find ways of changing career without, going back completely into education. I'd be quite happy to do both alongside each other, but that needs to be possible. So that if there's a stall that will
So it's
for
called
people like me, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, so it says TNA apprenticeships and career progression. So starting a new career or changing direction, staff share the pathway opportunities at our trust.
Okay, great. I'll look out for that one then. Thank you.
No problem at all. So do you want to try this activity while people are chatting, or is that going to push people too far? What do you reckon? Go for it. Okay. So the first question is, Glenn is standing behind Mary, and at the same time, Mary is standing behind Glenn. How is this possible? You can write it in the chat or you can speak up. Yes, they are back to back. So in the Tour de France, what is the position of a rider after he's passed the second placed rider? Yeah, Eleanor's on fire. The next one, take the letters E-R-G-R-O, put 3 letters in front of it and the same 3 letters behind to make a common English word. What word do you get? So it's underground. So if you put U-N-D at the beginning and then U-N-D at the end, you get underground. I was trying these out on my husband last night. We do these quite a lot in training, just to sort of just a little bit of fun really, and just to help people sort of realise what it feels like to be put under a little bit of pressure. So when we're working with our children and young people and we expect them to come to appointments and they're not really aware of what's going to happen, not sort of aware of what's going to happen in the session, and that anxiety that can bring with it, they've got to find the room, all of those kind of things. It's just to sort of give you an idea. So the next one is, would you rather a crocodile attack you or an alligator? Yes, Molly. Prefer the crocodile attacks the alligator. So that one is about where the sort of stress is placed in the sentence. So it's either a crocodile attacking you or an alligator. Or an alligator attacking you. So again, it depends on how you sort of ask it. The last one, and then you are free to leave. A hunter aimed his gun carefully and fired. Seconds later, he realised his mistake. Minutes later, he was dead. Why? It's a bit of a random one, this last one. Shall I give you the answer? I'll give you the answer for this one. So he was hunting in snow-covered mountains and his shot started an avalanche. So it's been lovely chatting. I hope you've all managed to gain something from this session. If you do want to have a chat about the speech and language opportunity that's coming up in the CAMHS South team for the lead speech and language therapists, please let me know. My email's in the chat if you want to email me, or if you want to have a chat about it now, then that's, you know, you can do that. But if not, enjoy the rest of your day and go and have a look at the market stalls. Thank you all.